A lonely sheriff arrives at a gas station. There are a lot of burned and abandoned cars around. He is going to fill the canister with gasoline, but this is a dead gas station. The sheriff sees a sign that says, "No gas." Is he going to leave? But hears sounds behind him. This is a little girl. She picks up her teddy bear and moves on. The sheriff calls her and says that he will not harm her. But this girl is the Walking Dead. She wants to attack, but the sheriff shoots her in the head. A few weeks before the apocalypse, two police officers are sitting in a car and talking about women. Shane tells his best friend about one of his girlfriends. He says that all his girlfriends were stupid. Rick is married and says they have problems too. His wife Lori wants Rick to spend more time with her. The last time they met, she insulted him in front of her son. The radio receives a message about armed criminals being chased. Rick and Shane go to the rescue. They stop on the road and lay out a strip of spikes and begin to wait. The criminal's car runs over spikes and flips over several times. The police begin the assault, but an armed criminal gets out of the car. He shoots at Rick, but is hit by his bulletproof vest. The police kill two, but a third man crawls out of the car.
You understand?
Rick is seriously injured. Shane puts pressure on the wound and asks to call an ambulance.
Hey, bud.
Shane comes to the hospital to visit friend. He gives flowers and says that this is a gift from the entire police department. Rick says the vase is disgusting, but Shane doesn't answer. Rick tries to call his friend, but Shane doesn't answer. Rick looks at the flowers and sees that they have already withered. He looks at the clock on the wall, but time seems to have stopped. Rick tries to get out of bed, but he doesn't have the strength. He falls to the floor.
Nurse, help!
Rick opens the door and goes out into the corridor. There is chaos all around. A lot of garbage and not a single person. He goes further and tries to call, but the phone doesn't work. Rick takes the matches and goes further down the corridor. Rick is shocked by what he sees. He goes the other way and finds a door. Behind it, there are many walking dead. Rick immediately runs away and finds a way out of the building. On the street, he sees a huge number of dead people. Rick finds a bike. Nearby lies a monster who was once a woman. Rick comes home, but his family is not home. He thinks they are dead.
Wake up.
Rick goes outside and sees a man walking slowly. But suddenly, another man runs up and kills the walker. A boy sneaks up to Rick and hits him on the head with a shovel. The sheriff wakes up in bed. A man named Morgan asks just one question.
Did you get bit?
Rick explains that he was a police officer and was shot. Morgan believes him because infected people experience fevers. The man invites Rick to dinner. Rick says he was in a coma and doesn't understand what's going on. Morgan explains that the apocalypse has occurred. People become infected with an unknown virus, after which they die and are resurrected. But the resurrected have only one goal: to devour other people. Morgan, his wife and son moved into this house after the zombie apocalypse began, but the wife became infected. She had a high fever and antibiotics did not help. She died and rose from the dead. Now she comes every night and tries to open the door. In the morning, Rick kills his first walker. Morgan teaches Rick that the only way to kill monsters is by destroying the brain. They go to Rick's house and he says that his family did not die. They left. He notices that there are no photo albums or family photographs. Looters wouldn't take such things. Rick brings new friends to the police station. The building still has a backup generator running. They take a hot shower and enjoy the moment. Morgan says there are rumors that Atlanta is a safe zone, and Rick thinks his family went there. Rick gives Morgan a rifle with a scope and ammo, and he takes a bag of weapons. Rick is going to go to Atlanta to find his family. He invites Morgan to go together, but Morgan says that he and his son need a couple more days to get ready. They agree to turn on the radio every day at sunset and inform each other of their location. Morgan and Dwayne go home. Rick sees a walker. This zombie was his colleague. Rick kills him with a shot to the head. Rick hits the road, but stops briefly at the park. He finds a zombie girl. He says he is sorry and kills her. Morgan comes home and decides to put his wife out of her misery. He starts shooting with his rifle and attracts the attention of the walkers. He kills several zombies and spots his wife. He tries to fire a shot, but cannot pull the trigger. Meanwhile, Rick is trying to establish contact via radio with someone from Atlanta. A group of survivors set up a camp near the city. Shane hears that the radio is working, but he is unable to communicate. Shane became the leader of the group. He saved Rick's wife and son, but he committed a vile act. Rick runs out of gas. He leaves the police car and goes on foot. He reaches the farm, but all the owners are already dead. Rick sees a horse abandoned to its fate. Rick gets on his horse and goes to Atlanta. He arrives in a dead city. There is devastation everywhere, burnt-out cars and walkers. Rick turns into an alley and sees a horde of zombies in front of him. The horse gets scared and tries to run away, but walkers surround them. Rick falls off his horse and tries to escape. Most walkers eat horses. Meanwhile, Rick kills several zombies and tries to hide under the tank. Zombies crawl under the tank, and Rick decides to put a bullet in his head.
Lori, Carl, I'm sorry.
The military man in the tank comes to life, and Rick shoots him. Zombies surround the tank from all sides. Meanwhile, in the survivors' camp, Lori goes into the forest to pick mushrooms. She hears strange sounds coming from the forest. She thinks they are walkers, but it was Shane. He kisses her, and she kisses back. Meanwhile, Rick sits in the tank. An unknown man contacts him on the radio and says that right now, Rick must get out of the tank and run towards him. The sheriff gets out and kills several zombies on his way. He meets a stranger. Glenn helps Rick escape. He brings him to his friends and introduces him to them. A woman named Andrea reacts very aggressively towards Rick and threatens him with a gun. They hear shots and go to the roof. A man named Merle fires a rifle at the walkers. T-Dog asks to put the weapon away, but the white man pounces on him and starts beating him. Rick intervenes and handcuffs the violent man to a pipe. The survivors find themselves trapped. Their building is surrounded by walkers. The group begins to think about how to get out of this place. Meanwhile at camp, Shane teaches Carl how to make knots. Lori likes the fact that Shane is trying to replace Carl's father. Rick comes up with a plan. They kill 2 walkers and drag them into the back. Rick and Glenn cover themselves with zombie blood and go outside. Walkers avoid them. Glenn panics a little, but Rick helps him collect his thoughts. Suddenly it starts to rain. The water washes away the rotten smell, and zombies begin to attack them. Rick and Glenn kill several walkers and find the car. They distract the walkers, and the rest of the group leaves the building. T-Dog tries to free the aggressive man, but accidentally drops the keys to the handcuffs. The rest go to the survivors' camp. Glenn says that without their new friend, they would not have gotten out of there alive. Rick gets out of the car and sees his family. He hugs his son and wife. Shane looks at his living friend and smiles, but realizes that his romance with Lori has come to an end. Merle remains on the roof. The sun hit his head and he began to rave. But soon, zombies began to break through the door. Merle tries to free his hand, but he can't. He sees the tools and decides to take extreme measures. At night, Rick tells his story about how he woke up in the hospital and got to Atlanta. A man named Ed adds wood to the fire. Shane asks him not to do this because it might attract the attention of the walkers. Ed doesn't want to follow the rules. Shane loses his temper and puts out the fire. The next day, the group members begin work, but after a while a scream is heard from the forest. Carl saw a walker. The men begin to beat up the zombie and cut off its head. Daryl comes out of the forest. He is the brother of the man who remained on the roof. The zombie's head comes to life, and he shoots him in the head with a crossbow. He asks where his brother is. Rick takes the blame and reveals that he handcuffed Merle to the pipe. Daryl tries to attack Rick, but Shane stops him. Rick promises that they will go there together and save Merle. Shane is against Rick going to town. He says that walkers have begun to enter the camp. Rick is needed at the camp to protect the people, but Rick feels guilty and goes to town. Shane remains at camp. Women go ashore to wash things. Shane plays with Carl in the water. Lori forbids Shane to communicate with her son. She says she will live with Rick and Shane should stay away from their family. Ed begins to scold his wife and orders her to go to the tent. She doesn't want to follow his orders. Ed punches her in the face. Shane goes to Ed and beats him up. He takes out all his anger on him. Meanwhile, Rick Glenn and Daryl come into town and climb onto the roof, but they only find a hand there. And this is where episode 3 ends. Write in the comments whether you have watched the series and subscribe to the channel if you want to see the continuation. Like the video and click on the bell to be the first to watch new videos.